Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Don Pravda, and this is the Twist News.
And I'm Erika Grey. And today we're going to talk about something that nobody's ever talked about, so we're going to talk about it here. And we're going to be discussing the European Union headquarters buildings versus the United States headquarters buildings. Washington versus Brussels. The White House, the Capitol versus the Berlaymont and the European Parliament and other buildings in the European Union and other government buildings in the United States. Impressions based on the buildings. Don, you go first.
Okay.
Your impression of Brussels based on the buildings, and don't forget, include Strasbourg, the European Parliament, and your impressions of Washington based on the buildings alone, if you knew nothing about the governments and you just visited the buildings.
But Erika, I'm prejudiced on this category. I entered Washington working in the government. Therefore, I have to tell you, I love Capitol Hill. I love its appearance. We were very fortunate to be there in cherry blossom season. Nothing in the world like it. To be there around late March, early April, it's exquisite. And you just love the white of Capitol Hill and the White House, of course. You might have heard it as white. It was burnt down by the British in the 19th century and renovated and repainted. But as far as Brussels goes, for me, that was a dark place, almost a kind of a sinister look to it, a feeling of course, something like from Star Wars.
Sinister, absolutely. Out of Star Wars.
We're not going to stereotype everything, and I know that Brussels is a very important place. It's not like we don't know that we...
My feeling about Washington was the buildings have a very... the structure is definitely powerful. So when you're in the buildings in both Europe, would you not agree that you can tell this is a power center because there's power that emanates both from Washington, D.C.'s buildings and Brussels. But Washington, D.C. has a very solid look in its architecture. And you can feel that it's a stabilizing architecture, a force, so that Washington, the United States, has been, right, Don, a stabilizing country for the world. Stabilizing. You feel that. Very powerful buildings. The Capitol, we went into the Senate building, you can feel it there, although I personally, Don, thought that the hallway looked like the hallway in The Shining.
Okay.
Famous hallway of The Shining.
We have a bit of a difference opinion, but I have more roots there.
But it did kind of look like The Shining, where you're going to see the twins pop up, at any moment.
But once you're in that caucus room that we attended, Erika, named after John F. Kennedy, where we attended a very special event with conservationists from around America.
That was interesting. We stumbled upon an event.
Very special event.
Cowboy hats and ranchers. And
I have to admit, I've never worn a cowboy hat, even as an actor. I've never even worn a cowboy hat. And that room was filled with them. But America is a vast country. It's not just Manhattan and D.C. It's those from Montana and Wyoming, and they were in attendance.
But the building has a very structured look and simplistic. I would say that the building is a more simplistic, structured,
that's true,
rich, opulent. Of course, it's a headquarters. Yes. But I also noted in the architecture, the oculus. You see that in the European building. You see that definitely in the Vatican. But also the obelisk, which doesn't look like this. It was built in the 1800s. It doesn't look like the obelisks that are in Rome, because Rome has like 13 of them, or the one at the Vatican, but it looks like an American version, and it's quite large. But wouldn't you say that from the architecture, which is opulent yet simplistic, angular, but almost a structure that's a solid structure, like we're going to be a solid country, we're going to be a country that will be the stabilizing force in the world. Would you agree?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Okay,
absolutely.
So now let's go to Brussels. Let's go to the Berlaymont. It's almost like the Berlaymont, and when you also take the Parliament, you can feel the power that these are major power centers. I think one of the things that struck me was how large they are. And I know that Washington's buildings are also large, but it struck me that Europe's were larger. Would you say?
I mean, massive. Buildings.
Massive, but there's also other buildings that are part of it. Just like in Washington, there's other buildings. Don had pointed out to me the congressional where Congress meets, and you have the Senate building. But you have in Brussels, the form of the Berlaymont is a crucifix, which is also strange. This cross feature with a circle, like the symbol of the devil, I'm sorry, the 13th floor is your commission president. Like, it gets spooky, and there's really a very spooky, it's a spooky, eerie vibe in Brussels, where in Washington, it's a stabilizing vibe. And it's spooky, eerie, but it's also something very frightening. Like the power, like this thing is going to be more powerful than Washington. That's the feeling I get just from the buildings. What do you think? From the buildings, just from the buildings, the Berlaymont, and then those creepy cathedrals that don't fit like the French or the German or something else. And it's a very strange ambiance, and these square, dirty buildings in Brussels, but Washington, the outskirts kind of had similar, this squared, structured, nothing.
But we have our monuments, the Washington, Lincoln monuments. We have big, bright environmental protection agency buildings, and you see the Supreme Court. It's a majestic building. And environmental affairs, one after another, seems to be beautiful buildings, I think. And traditional American buildings. They represent our nation. The buildings, as we pass through Washington, as we headed into the northwest section, you pass the Environmental Protection Agency near Capitol Hill, the Supreme Court, and you see international affairs and FBI. They're regal, they're dynamic, though. There's a feeling.
I think there's more like a squareness, more of a...
Yes, that's right.
Again, solid structure.
Yes.
Where
absolutely.
In Europe, it's a more modern, like circles, a lot of circles. The parliament is huge. Remember, we were in the parliament with over 700 seats in the hemicycle. The hemicycle it's like a football field. And you're on top and you're looking down, as we were looking down at the hemicycle. And there's a lot of more of that circular, more modern floral with the displays, where again in Washington it's more traditional. Wood is used, but in a traditional look, and marble, much more traditional, I would say, but as Don says, also very beautiful. I thought Europe is more kind of, not strange, but a bit more unusual, a bit more modern, definitely modern, but it's the size and scope is extremely powerful. And remember when we were on that river in Strasbourg and you're seeing these lovely buildings, Don, and all of a sudden the parliament, dun dun, it's like they're like boom, and it was like you could just feel that this is a major power. And then in each country, when you're in Europe, the EU flags are flying next to the national flags. So that's another symbol that's a key symbol that you see throughout the Union, is that flag flying next to the national flags. Did you feel the power around those buildings, power of that empire, or what will be very powerful? I'm glad you said that, Erika. Will be very powerful based on decisions they're making.
More powerful now in this world.
But can you feel that? Compared to Washington, it's a very diverse construct.
And you feel it's just beginning.
Well,
we're changing in politics.
Well, what's beginning is that the world is seeing the strength that's been there or has been evolving but has been ignored. That's what stood out to me, was the power that's over both capitals. You can feel it. You can feel that you're in centers of power. You can feel it from the architecture, from the buildings. So my summary is Washington being very more traditional, angular, simplistic, but yet a stabilizing, which really reflects what America was, a very stabilizing force in the world. And I'm saying was, because we're in a new order, a multipolar age of empires. Everything is shifting, changing. And it's not the old world order, but this European Union is definitely, you could feel that this is going to be an astronomical, powerful, astronomical empire. And that's what I felt from the buildings. Now, your conclusion, Don, maybe you disagree, but...
Well, beyond the buildings, Europe is rising again dynamically. It seems that they're of course, going to have their own agenda. The buildings, America, still a young country as compared to Europe. The buildings are very official. They're dynamic. They represent a different glow and shape and form. And America, simply a different look, shape, and it's just America as part of the Northeast into Middle America, and it's what we know. It's our look, it's our uniqueness, what makes us America.
So if you never knew anything about America or anything about Europe, and you went to either city and saw the buildings, which would you feel was the strongest empire?
Now I feel America is a strong empire. We have never focused, Eric and I have not been to China and made a tour of that ancient country. I feel America is glowing.
Okay, and I differ with Don. Europe is the one that the buildings carry more power. Not that the United States buildings don't carry it, but there's, as Don said in the beginning, something quite powerful over those European, almost sinister. Okay? That's the way to describe it. Like yes, that's what the feeling I get in Brussels and from the EU headquarters, quite powerful, something more powerful, definitely, than what's over the U.S. buildings in Washington. Any final words, Don?
Well, I'd have to say, when you go back to Washington at this time of year in springtime, you have to love Washington, and you see its bounty and majesty. That's the way I feel.
Definitely the cherry blossoms are worth a see. This time of year, they're only there for a couple of weeks. Well, till next time, be sure to hit that subscribe button as we talk about more the EU versus the US and Israel as it pertains to the West, and your comments will be welcomed.
And thank you.